Hi, I'm Femi OK. You're watching The Stream. The US elections are a national event with international consequences. Next week's face-off between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is likely to be one of the most scrutinised in history outside of the United States. Today we're joined by three of Jazeera's best for their take on the 2020 election. As always, we want to hear from you, so you can join us in our YouTube chat, type in your questions or comments, and our correspondents will do their very best to answer as many as possible. We start in India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump have shared a close relationship over the past few years, with each leader hosting state visits that were celebrated with great fanfare. Al Jazeera's Elizabeth Puranam filed this report in February as President Trump visited the Indian state of Gujarat in a trip dubbed Namaste Trump. Have a look.
It wasn't the 10 million people Trump said would greet him in Gujarat before leaving for India, but more than 100,000 people packed into the Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel Stadium to hear the US president praise all things Indian, from one of its founders, Mahatma Gandhi, to cricket stars and the Bollywood film industry. His greatest admiration, though, was reserved for Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
You are living proof that with hard work and devotion, Indians can accomplish anything at all, anything they want.
Friends. Prime Minister Modi, in turn, spoke of what he called the two countries' shared values.
Today, you are in an India which is full of diversity, where thousands of languages are spoken, which has thousands of costumes, cuisines, and several religious groups and communities. Our rich diversity and unity is a strong foundation of India-US relationship.
Liz Puranam joins us now from New Delhi. These two leaders, Liz, they're really good at throwing parties for each other. But what, in terms of concrete gains, could India get out of this election if Trump wins?
That's a really interesting question, Femi, because the highlight, I would say, of the relationship between these two countries of the last 4 years while President Trump has been in power has very much been their very close friendship. You know, the welcome for President Trump in Gujarat, that rock star welcome that Prime Minister Modi received in Houston in September last year that was called Howdy Modi. And they have this really close friendship, which gains them, I think, support, certainly Prime Minister Modi within his base, despite the fact that strategically there have been some would say historic lows in this relationship even. President Trump changed he changed the trading relationship with India to India's detriment. He's made changes to something called the H-1B working visa, which Indians are the main recipients of. And so I think people will really be looking to see what more concrete measures can come out of this relationship, which haven't so much in the last 4 years, apart from this sort of very close personal relationship between the two of them. One area that we have seen them move closer in is defense. In fact, the U.S. Secretaries of State, Mike Pompeo, and Secretary of Defense Mark Esper are in India right now. They're about to sign tomorrow. They're expected to sign the fourth and final of this military intelligence sharing agreement. So I think that where they have not been able to find common ground on the important issues on trade, on immigration, they might get even closer when it comes to defense.
Liz, let me share this with you. This is Jeff on YouTube, and Jeff Shustratori says, Indians are smart to keep Trump as an ally. And then also some other comments, because to try and think of 4 years between India-US relations, that's hard. But some of our community were able to sum it up very neatly. Have a listen.
And I think that the relationship that PM Modi shares with Trump is kind of pretentious, because Trump has threatened India before, and in today's debate he called India filthy. And I don't think that a country who shares such great relation with other country would call it with such names. That's just my take and my opinion on how I see US election.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and many of his Hindu nationalist supporters are fond of President Trump. They both implemented policies that are described as anti-Muslim, and they even campaigned together in Texas. But Indians are questioning whether that relationship has benefited the country. Serious trade disputes are ongoing, and the Trump administration has made it tougher to immigrate to the US for these coveted tech sector jobs.
Liz, it was all going so well, and then you sent me these headlines from the last presidential debate. Trump's filthy air jibe leaves some gasping, others nodding. Yes. Another headline you so generously shared with me. Donald Trump's remark on filthy Indian air sparks row. He did correct himself. I have to be really fair here, because he said filthy India, and then he said, actually, I really mean the air in India. And there's some agreement on Twitter. Shekhar Gupta says our air is filthy. And then there's some back and forth about how much Modi has spent on actually beautifying and making India look great. But even his great friend Trump calls India filthy. Yeah. Why is this such a big story?
You do have very smart viewers, Femi, and actually there have been two things that have come out of the US election campaign which have garnered the most interest here, and this is the second one, when Donald Trump said that India's air is filthy. I think it's because of the way he said it. Most people agree that India has a real problem with air pollution, but of course Donald Trump has such a way with words, saying, he said India is filthy, and then he said, it has filthy air. And he was talking about it in the context, of pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord. Well, of course, that doesn't help. It doesn't help India if the US, if the world's second biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, decides to not be part of the Paris Climate Accord, which of course has an impact on India, which is seeing, really bad droughts, really bad flooding, and all of that. So there was a backlash to it because of the way he said it, and also because if you look at it, it doesn't help India's air pollution if the US pulls out of the Paris Climate Accord.
I have a feeling that if there is a Biden-Harris presidency, people in India are going to be very, very happy for one particular reason, and that is Kamala Harris. Here she is talking about her heritage and her family and giving a shout out to Indian uncles and aunties. Let's have a look.
My mother instilled in my sister Maya and me the values that would chart the course of our lives. She raised us to be proud, strong Black women, and she raised us to know and be proud of our Indian heritage. She taught us to put family first, the family you're born into and the family you choose. Family is my husband, Doug, who I met on a blind date set up by my best friend. Family is our beautiful children, Cole and Ella, who call me Mamala. Family is my sister. Family is my best friend, my nieces, and my godchildren. Family is my uncles, my aunts, and my chitties.
Screaming from India. Do Indians feel like they're on the ticket as well? Is there a sense of like, our family's in America?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kamala Harris, India cares so much about what happens with the US election because the US is India's most important partner bilaterally. But it really cares this time because of the Kamala Harris factor. I mean, when she said that, it was the biggest news here the next day on television, on newspapers, on social media. I'll be honest with you, though, President Trump is popular in India because those who support Prime Minister Modi, and there are many people who support Prime Minister Modi, they also like Donald Trump. But then there are also many others in India who are just so taken with Kamala Harris because of the way she speaks about her Indian heritage. So it's really interesting to see actually there's been posters put up all over India, not just in her ancestral village in Tamil Nadu, but all over the country with people really getting behind her and supporting her.
Thank you so much for bringing us a view of India and Indian-US relations from the last 4 years and where India may well be placed when they're looking at the US election. Liz, thanks for being on the stream, as always. We go from India to Mexico. President Trump campaigned pledging to put America first. Nowhere has he showcased his platform more than with immigration. John Holman filed this report from the Guatemala-Mexico border in October 2018.
They gathered at the border between Guatemala and Mexico, asking to be let through. Thousands of men, women and children who'd walked at least 6 days in a caravan from Honduras. The atmosphere was charged. Many are fleeing violence or extreme poverty in their homeland and feel they can't go back.
We just want them to help us. Let us pass. If Mexico gives us a chance to work, we'd welcome it. Or be it the United States, Canada, Europe. My legs are hurting. I'm tired and hungry.
But police on both sides of the border have been given orders they should go no further. Their government's pressed into action by President Trump. He's adamant they must be stopped before they reach the US.
And we're going to have the military stationed. They're not coming into this country. They might as well turn back. They're not coming into this country.
Al Jazeera's John Holman is in Mexico City. Hello, John. Thanks for joining us. That story was almost 2 years to the day. What happened? It was caravan, caravan, caravan all of the time, and now nothing. What happened?
Yeah, that's actually really interesting for me seeing that, because it could have been any number of reports that we were filing. But that continued even up until the start of this year. But President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who's Mexico's current president, basically last year, President Trump said, if Central Americans keep getting through, then I'm going to keep hiking up tariffs on your goods going into the States. So President López Obrador sent a newly created National Guard, which he created to try and come to terms with Mexico's record levels of violence. He instead had to divert large numbers of that down to Mexico's southern border with Guatemala and station them there to stop people getting through. We were on the border actually when that happened. The optics weren't particularly good for Mexico. Lots of tear gas. They tried to not use excessive force, but heavily armed sort of troop-like policemen, no stopping people getting through. So that's just been one aspect of President López Obrador's relationship with President Trump. It's basically been, look, if you want to stay friends with me, from President Trump, you've got to stop these caravans, stop people getting up to the US border. And President López Obrador has done that. And from that point of view, I suppose successfully, the number of people from Central America heading through Mexico has decreased. The optics might not look great to his Latin American audience, seeing lots of Latin Americans being stopped in Mexico, but it has meant that this weekend, actually, President Trump said that President López Obrador was a gentleman. And,
yes, John, let me share this with you, because it leapt out at me on Twitter. Obviously leapt out at you because you tweeted it. So here's John. You can even read your own tweet, John, but I'll do it for you. Last US election, Donald Trump kicked off his campaign by saying, we're never going to forget this. Mexico was sending crime, drugs and rapists north. This time around, he calls the Mexican president AMLO, and then I'm just going to play what you retweeted out. Have a listen to this, everybody.
President of Mexico's doing a good job. It's not easy. They're heavily infected. The COVID has been very tough for them, very, very tough. And frankly, it's a great time to have the wall. But Mexico has been really hit very hard in a lot of ways. But he's a great gentleman and I think he's going to be a great president too. Joe Biden, president.
You should never deconstruct too much what President Trump says, because after a while it doesn't always make sense. But he said that with great fondness, John. He said, like, Mexican president, he's my buddy. I'm gonna use his nickname. What happened?
I think just that. Since President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's got into power, he's been fairly open at saying, we can't afford confrontation with the neighbour to the north. I want to get on with my domestic policy agenda. I don't want any interference from President Trump. I don't want the same calls to build the wall, the same sort of interference that was happening under the last president, Enrique Peña Nieto. So he's basically just done everything that he can to sort of placate him. I think you're seeing just in this article here, this is his only act. This was in Mexico City, but also recently he had his only foreign trip since he became president, and he used that to go to Washington, D.C. to meet with President
And I
Trump.
just showed that picture, and it looks like somehow the Mexican president and the US president have worked out a way to work together. How did he do that? How did he work out how to handle the US as it is right now?
I think that through the compromises that we talked about just a little bit there, when President Trump says, I'm going to hike tariffs, President López Obrador has found a way to accommodate him. There's one other thing, I suppose, to mention with that. Possibly our audience will remember that before the United States, when you asked for asylum there, that meant that you did it on American soil and you could stay on US soil while you did that. So President Trump decided to change things with a Remain in Mexico policy. Basically, you asked for asylum in the States, and you had to go back into Mexico, even when you're not from this country, while that process took place, which could take months. And Mexico's reluctantly, but it's accepted that. Another compromise that Andrés Manuel López Obrador has sort of felt that he had to make. We've been to those places, I personally and our team, tent camps in one city, Matamoros, systemic kidnapping of migrants in another city, Nuevo Laredo in Tamaulipas. I've never seen anything like that, actually. Medics Without Borders said that 3 out of 4 migrants crossing back were kidnapped, and that's what we sort of found evidence for that in our reporting. So it hasn't been without cost to Mexico, to other countries in Central America, but that's the way that President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has found to get on with Trump, to make sure that those attacks on Mexico go down, and that a sort of a weird, some people have called it a bromance, has taken place.
All right, a quick question for you, John. I know you can handle it. It's about Venezuela, but I know you can talk about Venezuela as well. So Stephen Lovejoy, hi Stephen. How will Biden or Trump deal with the crisis in Venezuela? Quick question, quick response, John. Go ahead.
Well, President Trump's been really tough on Venezuela and supportive of the opposition from the start. So I think his response there is already pretty set in stone. I imagine he'd continue with that. Joe Biden is the big question there. And I know that Lucia Newman, our Latin American editor, is actually writing something on this right now to go out on the Al Jazeera website. So I think it's Stephen. Stay tuned for that and have a look for her article.
All right, he's so good. He's teasing his fellow correspondents. He's telling you to stay tuned. We're going to have a little bit more of John Holman on our Instagram Live series later on. But for now, John, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Finally, to Iran. The US-Iran relationship has always been a complicated one, and over the past 4 years, Trump's withdrawal from the Iran deal increased sanctions and travel bans on the Iranian people. In January, a US drone strike that killed an Iranian general brought relations to an all-time low. Here's Dorsa Jabari reporting.
It's very unlikely that this will actually come to fruition for Iranians. But this is more a symbolic gesture now. This was done for Iran to say to the US president, this is what we think of what you did. We are going to take all the legal actions that we can, all the possible venues will be exhausted for us to try and get some kind of justice after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani was not the only event that has led to where we are today in relations between Iran and the United States. The U.S. withdrew from the nuclear deal of 2015 in May of 2018. That's because the U.S. President Donald Trump said that it was not a good deal for the Americans.
Dorsa Jabari joins us now from Tehran. Hello there, Dorsa. Can you get us up to date on that story? The idea of Iran putting out a warrant for President Donald Trump. That was some, I would say, power move, really, between the Iran and the US. What happened?
Well, essentially, Interpol did not agree with Iran, so their request was denied. But Iran wasn't really looking to actually carry out this request. It was more sort of for them to say, we are going to respond in any way we can. And this is what we think of what you did. You are, to the Iranians, Trump is an international war criminal for the actions that he's carried out. And also not only the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, but also what Iranians call the economic warfare that he's waged on Iran since he's come into power.
Dorsa, I have a question to you from YouTube. This is from Black Grey. Hi, Black Grey. Thanks for your question. Do young people in Iran like or dislike the US currently, Dorsa?
Well, I think young people are not a fan of the government, certainly not. There was never any hostilities towards the American people, and that's never been the feeling in Iran, regardless of how the governments were with each other at any given point. But I think at the moment there is a lot of anger and frustration at Trump and his administration on all the measures they've taken since he's come into power, starting with the Muslim ban and then leaving the nuclear deal and imposing very, very strict sanctions on Iran that has crippled the country's economy. And it was not in a good place to begin with. Hassan Rouhani had tried with the nuclear deal to try and bring out Iran's economy from isolation after years under Ahmadinejad and previous administrations and the UN sanctions. So there was some hope. I remember in 2016, in January, that the first Airbus had arrived in Iran after nearly 20 years, after the sanctions were lifted, so Iran could buy some new planes. And then that all stopped because of President Trump. So there's a lot of also anger at the current Iranian government, Hassan Rouhani, and the foreign minister, Javad Zarif. That's because people here are very disappointed in them not being able to deliver what they had promised. But really, their hands have been tied in very, very difficult circumstances. And Iran's political power structure internally is very, very complicated. It's not as straightforward as it seems. So the foreign minister and the president are also limited in what they can do when it comes to international diplomacy. There is a very structured power base that has to go through decision-making processes for any kind of changes to happen. And I think after what's happened after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, everyone's now waiting for the U.S. elections and the results. If Donald Trump is reelected, there is a sense that things would just get worse. A lot of analysts and people I speak to believe that there could be a military confrontation because there is no possibility of this system, this government, this establishment having any kind of dialogue with the man who ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. We saw pictures of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, at Soleimani's funeral services in Tehran. He was crying over the coffin of Soleimani. And he's the man who will ultimately make the decision about whether or not people in his government will have any kind of dialogue with the U.S. And I think given that fact, the Trump administration has absolutely no chance in resuming any kind of talks with Iran.
Dorsa, when we wanted to talk about how Iran was covering and thinking about the US elections, you sent us a webpage. This was from Press TV. Press TV is state television in Iran. So we can at least get a sense of how the state is looking at the US elections. Some of the headlines under hot topics. So we've got Giuliani involved in New York clashes between pro and anti-protesters. That's a big picture there. He's a very colourful character. I love this headline here. Has the US been chastised into reform, or is 4 more years of Trump needed? That's not even subtle. It's like, have you been good, or do you need more punishment regarding Trump? I'm not even sure that needs unpacking, but if you could get a sense of how Iranians, in terms of the administration in Iran, is thinking about the US election. Does that sum it up? Does that sum up, we are so over Trump right now? Very briefly, in 40 seconds.
Yes, definitely. I think there is a sense that the world has had enough, and Iran is one of the main players in that because they've received all the negative aspects of this administration, and they believe the world has now seen the true face of the United States and on the Trump. And I think everybody is now waiting for him to make an exit, hopefully gracefully, within the next few weeks. So there's also very much interest in the debates that have happened. There's been coverage on state TV. The presidential debates were broadcast. They were dubbed into Farsi and rebroadcast. So there is definitely an interest, and that will continue until we get the results.
Dorsa Javari, thank you so much, bringing us the viewpoint from Tehran. We really appreciate it. So, moving on. have a look at my laptop. Coming up at 20:30 GMT on Monday, a chance to talk to Al Jazeera's John Holman about Mexico and actually about Central America, because he can cover pretty much anything on our Instagram Live series. Our Instagram Live series is Monday through Thursday. It's an hour after our live show starts, and then you can join our conversation on the ajstream IGTV site. Thanks for watching. See you there.